Hello, everyone, and people other than everyone. Is there anyone other than Ted Rall coming to you from the left, editorial cartoonist.
And I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis coming to you from the right. We have a very special guest coming up. We sent him an invitation. He's got the link.
He'll be here. Yeah,
I didn't get the power.
I didn't give him the right directions. Normally with podcasts, you're supposed to tell the guest, come on a few minutes early just to make sure everything's cool. I just told him what time it was going to be, so he'll just be here, I'm sure, imminently. But Scott, and by the way, you are watching the DMZ America Podcast for Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. And if you hear my cat meowing,
what is wrong? What is up with Clovis? What does he have to say that hasn't already been said, that he hasn't already said?
That's a good question. My old cat, Indy, he used to sigh. Like he would be like, he had anxiety or ennui. He would literally be like, it was like, you're a cat. Like, what's got you so stressed? Are you worried? What are you worried about? Everything's going to be fine. It was very strange.
That's hilarious. I like that. We, in my family, we have a thing called the Stantis sigh, which is imagine I'm not sure if it's from the French side or the Lithuanian side, but it's really annoying for those who are the targets of it, who are, it is. It's got to be, because it's got to be like, Ted, just say anything. Just like.
Well, Scott, today we're going to be talking about Joe Biden and the evidence that he was failing mentally as far back as 2015.
Sure. Okay. That's the Stantis sigh. That's the hyper judgmental Stantis sigh. So
we have a colleague, editorial cartoonist colleague, who is one of the few women in the profession, and I know you know who I'm talking about. And she's like, she does that whenever.
Yeah.
Basically. So you can only really, maybe she means well. But it doesn't sound like it.
No, and it's not. No, and the Stantis sigh is also not meant to be nice or supportive. It's the opposite.
No.
So Joe Biden, apparently, why are we picking on him? Why, Ted? What's the point? He was fine, according to, and who better to tell us the absolute rock bottom truth than Bill Clinton?
Well, do tell what Bill Clinton had to say.
Bill Clinton said recently in the last few days, in fact, I sent this in the morning to Ted. I said, can you effing believe this? Because he said that when he saw Joe Biden was just fine. He was just Jake. He had his shit together. And while he was not grabbing women's breasts as he should, as the chief executive of this office, Bill Clinton said that Joe Biden was just fine. This book is bullshit. The original sin is bullshit. Jake Tapper's full of crap, and that Joe Biden was A-OK.
Yeah, it's amazing how many Democrats are saying, they'll just respond to. So Jake Tapper and his co-author, they went out and they got interviews from over 200 administration insiders, including 3 members of the Biden cabinet. Those are sourced mostly anonymously. However, I can tell you how this works. He works for a major publishing company. This all had to pass legal muster. The publishing house knows the identity of all of these sources, and if there was any question about them, they wouldn't have been included in the book because there would be major legal exposure. Let's be serious here. No one has sued or threatened to sue Jake Tapper or Alex for libel or defamation, right? Nobody has gone on Twitter and said, I hate you, Alex. I hate you, Jake. You're lying about me. Because of that, we know it's all true. Because it's like, if it's not true, it is incredibly libelous and defamatory.
Oh yeah.
So it's true. And so therefore, we have to treat it as true. And for Democrats to just say, well, we can just skip over this is ridiculous. I think we should go ahead and bring in our guest. I think Scott, you can introduce him to everybody. Charles,
hey, Charles,
thanks for joining us.
Oh, he got the memo. It's T-shirt day here at the DMZ America podcast.
I thought when you mentioned the word libelous and to introduce me, that was really impressive. Ted, your comment, Ted, was really smart, surprisingly so. And I don't think I've heard anybody say that if what they were saying wasn't true, the exposure for libel would just be enormous. And the fact that nobody is even threatening a lawsuit, including Biden.
Well, he was asked about it, and his response was, "I like cheese."
I think his response is, "I could beat the hell out of them," or something. I mean, it's just incredible. So go ahead and introduce me as the Nobel Prize winner and all the things.
Member of the Trilateral Commission.
Yeah, member of the.
Bon vivant.
Exactly. Bought Bitcoin at $2. Yeah.
Wow. No, Charles Lipson.
I wish.
No way.
Friend of the show. Charles is formerly a professor at the University of Chicago. He's a professor emeritus now. Are you not?
That's correct.
And I don't have your bona fides sitting in front of you. You write for everybody now. If you've heard the name, you've seen him in The Spectator. You've seen it. Who else have you written? You've written for Real Clear Politics.
I post things in men's rooms. I'm looking for the widest possible distribution.
But Charles has, and I've mentioned this as a guest before, I've said it behind his back, so I'll say nice things in front of him. Charles has been the best. I'm not sure precisely what word to use, Charles, but you codify what seems to be nonsense to many of us from the Trump administration. But you say, here's the motivation, here's what the hoped for end result is, and you actually intellectualize it and put it in a context that to a simpleton such as myself, I can then understand exactly what's going on. You've also done yeoman's work in dissecting the Joe Biden scandal is the only word we have for this. Ted Rall and I, for years, up to and just even a little before, Ted was a little before ahead of the curve before the inauguration in 2021, that Joe Biden was clearly addled. He was doing the Mr. Burns walk from The Simpsons, the hands walking in front of him. They talked him out of walking like that.
Yeah.
But the rest of it was, But we took so much bullshit, Charles. It was unbelievable, especially Ted, who's coming from the left. And, but I had cartoonist friends. We're both still waiting for our apology, by the way, because now every Democrat.
Hold your deep breath.
Yeah, because it's coming. You just know it's coming.
What surprises me is that Hunter's paintings aren't selling anymore.
What?
Why?
That's the economy. He's not good for the art market. Must be that.
People are too young to remember Joe People are too young to remember Joe Isuzu. Do you remember him? He was the guy who used to the front man for Isuzu Japanese cars, and the joke was everything he said was a lie. And it's like he was briefing Karine Jean-Pierre.
By the way, gentlemen, may I be the first to let you know, I believe I probably am. Karine Jean-Pierre, former press secretary for none other than Joseph Robinette Biden, has a new book coming out. She has just announced that she's no longer a Democrat. She's an independent.
Come on.
Washington are broken. And she doesn't really say what's in the book other than that. But presumably
you're true untrustworthy for MSNBC to hire you. You have reached a new low point.
Well, Ted had a question. I want Ted we're going to dive into it because there's a lot to dive into here. But one of the questions, Ted, we were just shooting the breeze, and Ted, as we often do, Ted called up and said, hey, Ted, ask Charles. Charles may actually have an answer to that question.
Well, so, all right. So first of all, we have to just, refresh people's memory. They may not want to hear it, but Joe Biden basically has been senile, at least since he took the oath of office, at least in part, right? I mean, since January of 2021, the evidence from people who were near him is clear. Nancy Pelosi, not a Republican by any means, said that early on in 2021, she took Biden to Capitol Hill and asked him to do a very common thing, make an ask, say, please vote for my bill, to House Democrats, please vote for my Build Back Better bill. He couldn't do that. He couldn't even just say, guys, I'd really appreciate it. It would mean a lot to me if you were to vote for this. He forgot and just basically rambled on meaninglessly about random stupid stories from his past and then left. And then she did a do-over and she said, Mr. President, I know you kind of forgot and you got off track, but could we do this again? Same thing happened again a second time. This was in 2021. He was not capable of performing the job of president in 2021. And so now we know that, and this is not unexpected, that basically there was a general downward trajectory because, he got old and he got his mental acuity flagged and now he is where he is. But during that time, much of the time, he was not able to sign his name. And an auto pen was used on a number of occasions. And he's not the first president to ever use an auto pen for this. But he signed
for official functions. I believe that he is.
I looked it up. It's happened before, but not very much. When the president is unavailable or for some reason, executive order. But Biden did a lot. Executive orders, presidential pardons, and even some legislation appeared to have been signed by auto pen.
The only thing he didn't sign by auto pen was his announcement that he was not. That he was dropping out of the race. Mm-hmm. Everything else was signed by auto pen. Probably
because he didn't have access to an auto pen, right? By that point, he was at his house in Delaware. So I guess the question is, and I looked this up, and I'm not clear on the answer. There's going to be an investigation by the Republicans. They're going to look into a lot of this stuff. I hope so, and I hope they do a thorough and judicious job. I mean, look, it's going to be political because it's politics, but I hope they do a thorough investigation. But as part of that, they say they're going to look into the question of, are these acts signed by auto pen legally valid? And I guess there's arguments on both sides of this.
So let me say a few things about this. I think that first of all, his decline is evident by so many public actions. You're talking about behind the scenes, but I noticed, for example, when he was still running for president, which is kind of incredible that they were running him for a second term.
I know.
They were doing 15-second clips, little short ads, and he couldn't get through them without multiple jump cuts.
I pointed that out when it was happening. I pointed that out, and my Democratic friends said he has a stutter.
By the way, that's documented in the book. And,
okay.
Like that was always true. They could never. There was a time when they needed a 1-minute ad, and apparently they went through 60 or 70 cuts to get to be able to extract one useful minute.
Yeah, and this time when they had a fake town hall, those are not unusual apparently, but there was a fake town hall conducted actually at the White House, and they couldn't use any of it. I mean, it was so bad. He was so bad they couldn't use any of it. And then at the fundraiser hosted by George Clooney, he forgot who George Clooney was. He introduced himself
even after an aide whispered in his ear, because often
I didn't know that.
A greeting line. This was not that, but sometimes there's a greeting line and there's hundreds of people waiting to meet a politician, and the person's behind them and saying like, okay, that's Scott Stantis. He's the cartoonist at the Chicago Tribune. It's like he's a big donor. Whatever. Someone reminded him, oh, George, that's George Clooney. And he still didn't know. It didn't jog his memory.
Well, so let's go to the auto pen specifically, it's not illegal to use the auto pen. And in fact, when it's normally used is precisely when he would be at the beach house for previous presidents. That is, when you're not physically present with the document.
Mm-hmm.
And the Department of Justice, I should say, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on podcasts, but
I do.
good. But the Department of Justice has a sub-branch called the Office of Legal Counsel,
Mm-hmm.
and the Office of Legal Counsel is kind of semi-independent, and it's considered very highly reputable across both parties, and they make determinations which presidents and department secretaries and so forth rely on. Those can, of course, be overturned by the courts and so forth, but their determination is that the auto pen is legally permissible to sign documents, but only if it's clear that the president himself essentially wants that particular document to be signed. It's not a general permission. It can't be used. But if you or I were working in the White House and we said, Mr. President, I have some pardons. I don't think they're controversial. I'll go sign them. You would be committing a felony because you would be fraudulently impersonating the President of the United States and taking over his role. My own view on this is that if the Republicans or the lawyers wanted to be very smart about this, they would take one particular instance where they thought it was very clear that the president had not authorized the auto pen for that particular use, and then get that before a court. Now, obviously not a court in California or Illinois or Massachusetts, but a real court. And where the person would say, where the judge, and it would be up the line, would say, this particular signature is not adequate. The president himself did not sign it. By the way, I think that you hinted at this, and I think this is right. One of the reasons they may not have wanted him to sign other documents was that the signature itself would have been evidence of cognitive decline, because you could compare it to previous signatures, right? But in any event, for example, there must have been other people in the room with Speaker Johnson when he spoke with President Biden 2 weeks or so after Biden auto pen signed a prohibition against natural gas exports to Europe. This is a big deal. This is not a small deal.
Mm-hmm.
Europe was buying gas from Russia, natural gas and other petroleum products from Russia. The United States was the alternate supplier along with Persian Gulf states. Biden, as part of whoever was pushing the new green agenda in his administration, signed by auto pen a prohibition against shipping any natural gas to Europe. It was completely against everything in U.S. foreign policy. Speaker Johnson, Mike Johnson, said to the president, I'm perplexed as to why you signed that. And Biden said, I didn't sign anything like that.
That's right.
And
wow.
If it was just, and they went on, yes, you did. It was signed by the auto pen. No, I didn't. I didn't know anything about this. And I can assure you, just by inference, that Biden was not alone in the room with Mike Johnson. There were other people in the room. And those people who were in the room, who Mike Johnson would know, should be put under oath to test.
What about Speaker Johnson himself?
Well, Johnson could do it, but it would be a he said, he forgot story, right? So what you want is a third person in the room who, under penalty of perjury, would say Biden didn't say that, and but that
But
person,
Biden did say that, and I believe Johnson.
right, I believe Johnson, but I don't want a situation in which the court has to decide, does a Republican Speaker of the House have more credence than the president, who would probably deny it? But a third person who was under oath would be facing perjury charges and a Department of Justice that would bring them. So that person might say, yes, the president did say that. The best they would then be able to come up with was, he may have said that 2 weeks later, but he didn't say it at the time. He knew it at the time. That's the only way they can escape from that hole. But I suspect once you get one auto pen ruled illegal, then every single one of them will be subject to court scrutiny, including the 8,000 some odd pardons in the last week or so of his presidency.
Well, the dam's going to break, right, at some point. That's always how these things go. And I'm sorry, Scott, but I just want to, ask Charles this. I mean, so this is currently, so I guess here's the question, right? Like, I looked into this question as well about the auto pen. And apparently in 2005, the Supreme Court weighed in on this question and said that it is legal for the president. And my take is the same as yours. If the president, but basically it's kind of like during COVID, I sold my mom died. My mom had a house. The nation was on lockdown. The house was in Ohio. I'm in New York. I couldn't attend a closing ceremony. So they sent me the closing documents, which I normally would have signed in person for selling her home. Instead, I did DocuSign online.
Right.
Now,
I've done those. Yeah.
So the question I've always wondered as a former banker, I mean, I'm old school, old banker in the 80s. It's like, if it's not your signature, it doesn't work. You can't buy a car without your signature on it. Like, you can't apply for credit without a loan application unless that's your signature, notarized, duly witnessed, and so on, right? This is a tradition that goes back thousands of years. So now we have, I don't even know, I guess the point is, if you have control of a particular computer with a certain IP address, I guess it's deemed that DocuSign is good enough. And I guess the court's saying, if Biden's like, hey, I'd like to pardon Scott Stantis for his myriad of crimes, go ahead and take care of that while I'm off, I'm off jet skiing in Delaware. So as long as everybody knows that was Biden, he's of sound mind. He wanted Scott pardoned. Done. Fine. No muss, no fuss. Okay, but we don't know, like you say, right? Like whether he was.
I think we do.
So there's the double question, right? And I'm saving the best one for last. Did he really know? I'm going to say probably not for a lot of this stuff. Not based on the Tapper book. He wasn't really running the country. And then
who was?
Sound mind. I mean, if he put something in front of you, even he signed it in person, but he's okay. I mean,
do you remember Howard Baker's great questions?
What did the president know, and when did the president know it? Now,
and I've rephrased that.
What did the president not know, and when did he
not know? That's exactly. I wrote that in a recent article. What did he not know, and when did he not know it?
Yep.
And
great minds.
It's exactly, and it's just it's a scandal. Let me tell you though.
Well, is it a scandal if it's not all over the news though? I mean, it's a fucking problem, but is it a scandal?
Yeah. Scandal. Let me take some of the politics of it. If 6 months ago you told me that some of Biden's problems in office were likely to that the Republicans were likely to run with them, I would have said, well, they'll want to, but but the public generally doesn't vote retrospectively. Biden will be out of office and sort of out of politics. People will want Republicans to be looking forward, and the Democrats won't want to look at it. So I always like to think, what did I misunderstand? What did I get wrong about that? And the answer is that the scope of this scandal is so large, and the number of people implicated are so senior, and the question of who is actually running the government if Biden wasn't is so important that ordinary people are interested in it. I should say that the cleavage within the Democratic Party may also help. Does anybody believe Chuck Schumer? Does anybody, Nancy Pelosi has a broken hip, right? And Hakeem Jeffries doesn't have nearly her kind of clout. And he's in the minority party anyway. The new generation, represented by AOC and Bernie Sanders. Hard to think of Bernie Sanders as the new generation, but they're not going to defend Joe Biden, right? They want
kind of did, though, at the very, according to the Tapper book. It's interesting because Joe Biden was brought in to kneecap Bernie Sanders. That was his purpose.
That's correct. That's right.
But then when the crisis hit last summer, after the disastrous debate, Biden was his last defenders were the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. People like AOC and the Squad, and even Bernie.
Why were they defending him?
Well, apparently he gave them a seat at the table back in 2021. They participated. They were consulted on Build Back Better and so on. They were grateful for having come in from the cold, and so they kind of felt like they owed some fealty.
The stories I've heard, Ted, are that it was more than a seat at the table. That they were that Elizabeth Warren in particular and Bernie too were given huge swaths of appointments in the administration. But I don't know that for a fact. I'll say this about Elizabeth Warren. It is a puzzle why she didn't drop out before the Massachusetts primary. So Clyburn led the kneecapping of Bernie in South Carolina, and then I think Biden then won.
Super Monday then also, right?
And he won in Alabama. Is that
Beto.
Right, Scott?
It was like in Texas. He flew Beto O'Rourke.
Yeah. Right.
Klobuchar
But he didn't. He would have won. Bernie would have won in Massachusetts and would have given him new life. But Elizabeth Warren refused to drop out. She didn't win there, I think. But then she dropped out right.
Bernie during that primary.
She what?
She was after she knew
right.
Bernie
and
was
she dropped out right after. So we don't know why that happened. By the way, another thing we don't know, unless it was in the book, which I haven't read, was the threats that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer used against Biden. They told him, you can do this, you can drop out the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. And he didn't drop out the easy way. And there were more phone calls made to him. And the rumor was that Pelosi, but it could have been Schumer, but I think it was Pelosi, said to him, if you don't drop out, we're prepared to invoke the 25th Amendment, and we have Kamala on board. But I don't know that that's the case, and I haven't seen anybody report it or deny it. That is, it's one of those, you'd think that itself would be a huge story. What pressure did they ultimately bring to bear on President Biden to get him to drop out after that long weekend? He had waited 2 weeks plus, and then there's that weekend in Delaware where he finally drops out. What pressure did they bring? What was new?
Well, that's
Well,
in the book. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, it's in the book.
What did they say?
Well, basically, they just kept it. They at first thought he'll see reason, he'll come to his own conclusions, and in the end, what finally did it was the little cabal, which they called the Politburo, which was
Right.
basically Jill Biden's chief of staff and people like that, former junior campaign aides who were basically running the country for 4 years, and they were even keeping Pelosi and Schumer away from the president. I mean, it's startling. They were calling the Biden team was calling members of the House who were aligned, and they said, we need you to go call a press conference and say you've talked to Biden and he was fine, and that you've spoken to him recently. And member after member said, I haven't seen the president in 2 years. I can't do that. And
Wow.
and so
It's
literally
amazing.
only
They were asking people to lie, just straight up lie.
well, they didn't even know that they hadn't seen them. And only 2 members of the cabinet ever laid eyes on the president the last 2 years that he was in office. So only the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. So that's it. Like Pete
Weekend
Buttigieg
at Bernie's.
didn't see him. Yeah, it's Weekend at Bernie's. It really, truly is. It was worse, of course. We thought it was bad, but it was worse than we thought because obviously.
It was
I'm
worse
gonna-
earlier than we thought too.
But anyway, to answer your question, Charles, in the final analysis, they were waiting and nothing happened, and they knew that that Biden's a pig-headed dude, and that he was just not going to go quietly. And in the end, they finally insisted that he see the polls that showed that he only had a 5% chance of winning against Trump. And they were like, you are going to lose no matter what. Kamala may lose also, but you're definitely going to lose. You have to step down. You're going to be defeated no matter what. And in the end, it was Schumer who said, I need a meeting with the president. I need to make you quit keeping me at arm's length. I want to meet with him one-on-one. I'm going to show him the polls. I'm going to bring in the pollsters who you've been keeping away from him all this time. And we're going to tell him the truth. And if you don't, I'm going to call a press conference and demand to see the president.
That
was the final analysis.
It was the threat that
of going public,
of in effect exposing the cabal that was preventing.
Precisely, he was going to say, I've been trying to see the president. They won't let me see him. I mean, considering his position, right? I mean, he's one of the 3 grand poobahs of the Democratic Party. I mean, he's the kind of guy, he should be able to pop into the White House gate unannounced and say, I need to see the president within the next hour. And he should be able to do that.
Well, Charles, let me ask you this. Ted and I batted this question around a podcast or 2 ago, and I think you'd be a great guy to give us a definitive answer. And it may be too big and it may be too early, but is this the biggest scandal in the history of the presidency?
Well,
this was a coup. Now, let me tee it up from my perspective. This was a coup d'etat. This was unelected people making executive decisions behind closed doors. That's a coup d'etat by any definition, in my view. Is this the biggest scandal in the history of the presidency?
I think so, actually. Far bigger than Watergate. The only one that rivals it is Edith Wilson.
Yeah.
And for the same reasons. But the difference is that the federal government today is so much bigger and so much more important in our lives. Now, at the time, Wilson was not only president, but we were at the end of World War I, and we were trying to craft there was a peace afterwards. He had a stroke on the campaign trail trying to rev up support for the bad treaty, ending World War I. Well, actually, sort of a reconstruction treaty. And then they kept him out of public view. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, John F. Kennedy who himself had serious medical problems that were hidden from the public, and of course was bedding every intern in the White House, and that was known by Ben Bradley, who edited the Washington Post, but who was his friend. Those things weren't never exposed. But during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the president and all of his top cabinet members disappeared from public view for 13 days. And it wasn't even known that they hadn't been seen for 13 days. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, all these top people, his brother, the Secretary, the Attorney General, and so forth. It wasn't even known for almost 2 weeks that these people were completely invisible. Nobody'd seen them, right? That's how different the media is today. But that's why it's so striking that they were able to hide Biden. And when you see Biden in these very occasional, he never answered questions, never went to a press conference, that sort of thing. But when you see him occasionally in these things, his eyes are like this and they don't blink. And the White House physician, well, that's right. He's terrified, but he's also on something. I mean, I couldn't keep my eyes from blinking if I.
Yeah, the book addresses the question of whether he was, given speed or something for the State of the Union address, and it doesn't say yay or nay, so you draw your own conclusions.
Right. It's just it. But your question. Well, let me ask the same question of you. Do you think this is the biggest? I've written that. I mean, so I've said it is the biggest scandal in American history. It's not the biggest crisis. The biggest crisis was a civil war, or as Scott calls it, the war between the states. But
no, the war of northern aggression.
The war of northern aggression. But this is enormous, and it requires some legislation, something that the Congress used to do, especially about the auto pen, that we need to have clear, there needs to be a clear approval by the president for each use. There needs to be somebody who is in the room who is responsible and can be held responsible and called before a court if there's a challenge. We need to have legislation on that, and of course nobody's proposing it. But what do you
our conclusion was absolutely, yeah, and very much along the same lines as you just laid out. Edith Wilson was similar, in terms of usurping power illegitimately. But I can't compare. I don't know that there's anything. I mean, you look at Watergate, you look at Teapot Dome, you look at Mobler. Oh gosh, the late
Mobier.
Yes, that was funny because it was like the guy. I think it was Speaker Blair. None of this.
Monica Lewinsky.
None of this compares to this.
Pigs.
And we still don't really have the names of the people. Apparently, they are enumerated in the book of the people who promulgated this outrage and pushed this. We know Jill Biden was in on it.
Her chief of staff was apparently a really major player, and everybody feared him.
There's a deputy Biden campaign aide who was also involved, and there's about 5. There's also the people like. Everybody around knew, right? I mean, like if you read the book, like every few pages, someone comes in from. So if anything, Tapper is too kind. He says, these people, they were so close to him. They basically just sort of, they were in denial. They refused to see it. But every now and then someone would come from the outside who hadn't seen the president in a long time. And they'd be like, what the fuck? Like, and so that keeps coming over and over. And
Bill Clinton would have taken that as an instruction.
When Bill Clinton met Biden, he went back and told Hillary.
Bill Clinton, did you see him this week defending Biden? I saw Biden.
I was mentioning that before you came on. Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe, although
I
he
just
is,
believe he was just fine. I didn't see anything. God, it's like Sergeant Schultz. I see
Well,
nothing.
nothing.
Charles, to be fair, if you can't believe Bill Clinton,
You know, I grew up across the Mississippi River from Bill Clinton. He was a couple of years older than me then and still is. He went to Boys State in Arkansas while I went to Boys State in Mississippi. And I
Oh.
knew dozens of women in Arkansas who had not slept with Bill Clinton.
That's hard to believe.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
dozens, maybe
They must have
more,
been lesbians.
maybe more. But and but my favorite story about them is how the money that Hillary made. Well, the Monica Lewinsky story, I always thought was he was talking on the phone to a congressman while one of
Alabama.
these events was happening. And my thinking
Oh, he
was,
was also talking to Dick Morris. Well, Dick Morris was having his toes sucked.
I
And
just
then-
thought that is efficient use of time by an example.
Multitasking is a very important trait of rich and powerful people.
But Bill Clinton,
But like, what about that question? I personally can't think of any political scandal in U.S. history, or for that matter, in most other countries' history, that comes close to this. I mean, the
this is
Democrats
really,
they had a dude. Let's look at this. Like, let's take it chronologically. They had 20 totally viable primary candidates. Amy Klobuchar could be president. I mean, she's unpleasant, but she could be president. They said, okay, we're going to shit can our 20 extremely viable people. Fuck Cory Booker, fuck Elizabeth Warren, fuck Bernie Sanders, fuck Mayor Pete. But we're going to put in this old rotting carcass. We're just to shit can Bernie because we don't want Medicare for all. We really hate that.
Well, I think the real problem with Bernie was that they thought they would lose, and not just lose.
No, that's not true. They thought they knew they were going to win.
Oh,
No,
really?
I don't think
that's in the book
Ted.
too. And
They thought they were going to win.
they were going to. Bernie was going to kick out the DNC and replace them with his people. That's what this is about. It's an internal party thing. So anyway, they decided to shit can all these Democrats. They install Joe. They put their thumb on the scale. They make all the superdelegates support him. Boom. They put him in. They know he can't do the job. Then they know, okay, we've got this 82-year-old demented guy. We're going to put out the word that he's only going to run for one term. And then we're going to put in a vice president who we know internally can't do the job, isn't up for it. We don't think she can do the job. It's not that the public doesn't think it. We don't think. But we're appointing her vice president anyway, because her only job is to step in, really, if something happens to the president. But she can't do that. But okay, she's got the job.
John Nance Garner. You remember?
Could pick someone else. Don't. You pick her. Then you fake the presidency for 4 fucking years, and then you try to do a do-over. Come on. I mean, how does Watergate come close?
Yeah, no, this is a huge scandal, and another reason it lives is that all the Democrats who are asked about it really can't answer. They have no good answer. They can answer what Bill Clinton did and nobody believes them, or they can say, Bill Clinton basically said he was fine, and also I didn't see him much. They can give the I didn't see him much, or they can say, I don't think he was fine. But if they say, I don't think he was fine, then they have to answer the question, why didn't you say that to the public? Because this is not an small internal matter. This is the man with the nuclear codes. This is the man who's making very big decisions. And you have a responsibility to the public. And so I think it's very damning. And the only beneficiaries are governors, Democratic governors, because they weren't in the loop They can credibly say, if you're Jared Polis in Colorado, I was busy keeping people baking cakes.
Yeah, but even in Colorado, they own television sets, right?
That's right. But they can more they're not as tarred by it, and there is no
True.
younger generation, and it does seem to turn things over to AOC because she can say, I was against him all along.
She can't say that because there's, her
Yes.
opponents will have the receipts of her defending Biden from last summer. The thing is, the Democrats have a major credibility crisis. Their approval ratings are at record lows, 27% approval rating. It shows that the polls show that Republicans are trusted on one issue after another more than Democrats. That at a time when Donald Trump is the president. So let that sink in.
Yeah.
And then, so that said, Democrats I have a column coming out tomorrow that's basically about the crisis management, like corporations, like Southwest Airlines when they had to cancel all their flights, and they handled it well. They came out and they were like, okay, we fucked up. We didn't invest in infrastructure. We're going to upgrade all our systems. We're really sorry we fucked up. KFC back in the England,
Tylenol problem.
Tylenol's the classic example of the right thing to do. I mean, Johnson & Johnson could totally have said it's not our fault. It wasn't their fault. It was some maniac.
Instead, they pulled all their stuff, kept it off for a long time. The whole thing.
And they kept everyone up to date all the time. Full page ads in the newspaper, every ad in every paper in the country, over and over. They were completely transparent, so
they saved the company.
And I think Democrats, if they want to move forward, they say, let's look forward. You can't just be like BP after Deepwater Horizon. You're going to have to fess up. Like, basically, it's got to be a message that goes something like this. You got to say, we've been criticizing Donald Trump for lying. And we can't, if we're acting like Donald Trump, we're no better than he is. So we've got to get back to telling the truth. We're sorry. We lied to you for 4 years about Biden, and it won't happen again. That's all we can say. There's nothing we can do to undo the past.
By the way,
that's what they've got to start doing. And
I think you're right. I think you're right, but it's so dangerous. And the idea of a politician telling the truth like that is it's against character. But
although JFK Chicago, after Bay of Pigs, right? Great example.
Yes. In Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson has an approval rating of 6%. 6%. They don't list the numbers. They name the people who still support him. But in my latest article, it's not quite out yet, but it will be out in The Spectator on what went wrong in Chicago. I say his approval is under 10%. Gonorrhea has better polling.
Oh, for sure. Charles, Democrats, they're also, the thing is, this is a pattern of behavior, right? Dianne Feinstein, same thing. Right now, John Fetterman.
I don't think that's right about Fetterman. I thought it was right about him before, but it seems I haven't seen any of that in the past year or so. After his stroke and so forth, that was right for a while. But have you seen anything recently, Ted?
Yeah. First of all, there was a big piece in the New York Times that revealed that, among other things, he's no longer able to meet with constituents at all.
Oh, is that right?
In over a year and a half, because he can't be trusted not to physically assault them if they piss him off.
Oh, God.
Or he gets annoyed. His wife is going to leave him because she's had enough. There's some sign that he had this obsession with Israel and Gaza goes beyond support for the Jewish state to sort of a mean streak that somehow is like manifesting post stroke, which we do see. He doesn't show up to meetings. He doesn't show up to votes. He misses almost every vote, and there's like no explanation for why he gets to dress up like he's going to Gold's Gym on the floor of the U.S. Senate You know, I mean, he's
I
not
don't know that the
he's
three
not
of us
serving the
can make
people of
any
Pennsylvania.
complaints,
He's
about how he dresses.
But he's incapable of serving the people of Pennsylvania, is my point.
Oh yeah, but let's talk about Pennsylvania for a minute, especially since Scott knows the phrase. It's Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in
Alabama in
between.
between, yeah.
Uh, is it going to be the next Ohio?
And you mean turning red? Like
Yeah.
reliably red?
It's right now it's purple, but I just don't know. I mean, what Trump did on the steel industry and so forth, I don't know.
Oh yeah,
And he's
no,
gonna play.
I'm looking at the numbers. I think this is what you're referring to. Looking at the numbers of middle-class Americans and how the Republicans have really zeroed in on, and how middle-class Americans, true middle-class Americans, everyone thinks they're middle class in this country for some reason. If you make $18,000 a year or $500,000 a year, you're middle class, which is not
true.
middle class. But working class people, the Republican parties have done great work at getting those votes, getting that support. I was going to ask, let's move the conversation forward a little bit. What's next? First of all, should there be hearings? Ted and I agree that there should be hearings, but,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
but it's going to become a
Will there be?
fiasco.
Huh?
There has to be. I think
yeah.
there has to
I
be.
feel like there's been dithering. Is that just Washington being Washington and it'll happen, or what's going on?
I think that if there are hearings,
on their
first of all,
legislation.
hearings accomplish nothing except exposure, and most politicians want exposed is themselves.
Mhm.
And I think it does put
Well put.
Democrats in a very awkward position here. But the best hearings were those like Watergate, where there were serious behind the scenes investigations first. And then instead of each senator or House member doing 5 minutes and then another 5 minutes and it's all disjointed, you give a lot of the time over to the two general counsels, the Republican and the Democrat. That would require a special committee, I think. But that would be the right way to do it. You would have somebody very senior and well respected, a Mike Mukasey type figure on the Republican side, and the Democrats would have to decide whether they want a party hack, or whether they want to go with somebody serious, and then you would let them do that, and then let senators follow up. And there would be a report from Mukasey or whoever. But that's the right way to do it. When has the U.S. Congress done anything right? It's important to recognize two things, I think, about the way that the Congress now doesn't work. One is that there are almost no cross-party votes, very few in either, almost none in the House, and one or two generally in the Senate. Fetterman might do it from the Democratic side, and two or three, Susan Collins, because of her constituencies in Maine, and Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. But very little cross, and any legislation other than a few financial bills or reconciliation and rescission require super majorities to stop the filibuster. So you can't get legislation through. And then the president's power has expanded so much since Lyndon Johnson. It began with FDR, but it's since Lyndon Johnson that the main role of Congress is no longer legislating, it's oversight of federal bureaucracies rather than legislation. They don't do oversight well, but they've almost stopped legislating entirely, and then that leaves everything as a presidential executive order. So we're more and more ruled by King George III, and this is not party. This is bipartisan, and the fact that that the cuts, it was far from $1 trillion, but 137 million or something billion in cuts by Elon Musk, was pared down to something like around 6 billion or so in the House bill. Just tells you how completely captured they are by local pork projects. It's just awful.
There's a question from James Brown, who I doubt is actually the hardest working man in show business or the king of soul. But how will this affect the midterm elections in 2026?
Charles, you're our expert.
Go ahead.
My quick take is that the Democrats had a golden opportunity with the assent and the 2-vote majority in the House of the Republicans to come forward and really do, their whole stratagem was to just sit back, let Trump and his minions screw things up so badly that they could just march to a new majority in the House and the Senate.
That was Carville's idea.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a bad one if you had something, an alternative that was going to be attractive to the American voters. However, now you have, the Democratic Party polling at 27%. I don't know that they're going to have the success in the midterms that they thought they were going to have, because the number is so razor thin in the House. That's a possibility, I suppose. The Senate, I don't see that happening. I can't see it happening. Charles, your thoughts?
I agree, but I will say the wild card is whether we have a recession before the midterms. If you have a recession that's more than 6 months before, it is sort of 6 to 9 months is the maximum impact on the election. If you're pulling out, which is often the case, you're pulling out of a recession in the 6 months prior to the election, it still hasn't registered with voters. There's a lagging perception. Let me say something also that's a major scandal, and I don't know exactly how it works, which is that if you look at the Republicans have, an under 5-vote majority. It's gone back and forth depending on who drops dead this week, but they have a very thin majority in the House, but they won. If you look at the total House seat votes for Republicans, total votes for Republicans versus total votes for Democrats, it was quite a substantial majority, like several million votes, but it only yielded a very slim number of seats because of two things. One was gerrymandering, and the other was the way that the census counted people. And there's a real controversy as to whether or not a couple of red states should have gotten an additional legislator and didn't. That's kind of faded away and become part of the past. But all these red states are growing and all the blue states are declining.
Yeah.
But and so won't reflect until 2030. But going back to the midterms, normally the party out of power wins, 20 to 40 seats, and it would only need to win about 10 to flip it. And I'd say it's up in the air. And if there's not a recession, I'd say it's probably the Republicans to lose.
So basically, it's about, will the voters hate the Democrats more for having lied to them for 4 years, or hate the Republicans more for fucking up the economy?
That's right. Or will there be other issues? And one issue could be, will there be a big terrorist attack? Another issue could be the impact of the closed border. I think that people are underestimating the Democrats made a huge mistake, and it's still inexplicable to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on why. I'm one of those people who believes we all make mistakes. It's not bad to try things. to try doing things a different way. The mistake is sticking with a bad
Which is what the
policy.
Democrats did.
Right. So we all are old enough to remember all the high-rise public housing, which turned into such a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to people, the problem with the high-rise public housing wasn't that they built it, but that they built it everywhere at once. If they built it in 4 random cities and let it go for 3 or 4 years, they would have begun to realize that while you may live, Ted, in a 12-story building, if the elevator goes out on Friday, it's repaired by Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
If you lived in a high-rise public housing building and the elevator went out on Friday night, it might not be repaired till a month from Friday. And if you're a single mother, you can't supervise your children downstairs. There would be all these problems, but instead they built them everywhere all at once. So here's the problem on the southern border. It's not just that they opened it and failed to enforce any of the laws. They did the same thing in Iran. There were all the sanctions. Trump had broken Iran. It had no money. Biden decided, I won't enforce any of the sanctions laws, none. And so it became rich. But here's the problem, same problem on the southern border. Why stick with those problems? Biden half reversed the policy on the southern border. I don't understand why he pursued it in the first place. But he half reversed it in the final year as they saw the electoral consequences. They stuck with the Iran policy. They never changed it at all. Do you have any explanations for why they stuck with these policies? Or was it just these were policies advocated by this Politburo, and the Politburo was never going to face the voters, and that they like these policies?
That's the only explanation, isn't it? That it truly is. I mean, it's that simple. They liked it. There's a cabal of 5 people behind the curtain, and that wasn't going to change. I'm with you, Charles. I was mystified by the policies both towards Iran and especially along the border.
The border, they thought the Hispanics would like it and that voters would like it.
They don't.
Pretty soon, they should have known. Pretty soon, they hate it. It's been part of their drift to the Republicans.
And it's not.
And they never changed.
The polling on Hispanics the whole assumption Democrats have always had is Republicans left the border open because they wanted the cheap labor and it would drive down wages. Democrats wanted the open border because they thought that grateful Hispanics, both new and old, would vote for them. That second part turned out not to be true. The first part was true. And we've known this for a long time. I understood the assumption 20 years ago, but it was debunked.
Have you ever heard either a black person or a Hispanic? By the way, in universities, they tried for years to get the word Latinx used.
Latinx.
But anyway, Hispanics or blacks use the term person of color. No, it was a conceit by elites and by Democratic pollsters or something to ensure that around the idea that blacks and Hispanics would vote together. But if you look in a city like Chicago, and I assume this is true all over, there was a huge fight. We've spent huge amounts of money on schooling and healthcare and all the rest for people who came into the country illegally, what Democrats call undocumented people, as if they forgot their documents. But if you go to a community meeting in a black community, those people are furious because they're fighting for limited resources, government resources.
We have illegal migrants here in Manhattan, or not anymore, but they were at the peak of the crisis under Biden. It was living in the gymnasiums of public schools so that the kids couldn't go to gym class or attend sports. It's insane. And these were minority, predominantly black and Hispanic parents who were furious that wasn't happening in the few public schools.
And you know that
white.
they were supposed to be in ICE detention facilities where they would have received a hearing within 35 days and at low cost to house them. Instead, the Biden administration decided to release them into the interior of the country, house them at $400 or $500 a night in hotels, and tell them to come back in 4 or 5 years or more for a hearing. Why? Has anybody come up with the reason why these policies were pursued?
I don't know. And I don't understand also like the asylum policy. It's like, okay, I get Haiti. Haiti's a shithole. It's a failed state. But Cuba, I love Cuba. I'll go back to Cuba tomorrow as a tourist. I mean, there's no reason you can't send someone, unless they're like a militant, like anti-communist, enemy of the state. There's no reason for other people. You can't send them back to Cuba. Venezuela, same thing. Venezuela is not a failed state. Like, there's no reason why there was and I can think of lots of other countries that really should.
Failed state is not. And by the way, I believe that the final draft of the legislation does not use the word shithole. Could be wrong. I've done a search. I did a search, legislative search. Shithole doesn't appear.
And Charles, we don't let the Afghans who are, that we turned into traitors to work for us. We don't let them come.
The only reason you can apply for asylum is not for economic reasons. Right. It's not because your country is dangerous or anything else. It's because you are potentially a target. And only 1 out of 10 people who come over receive that. Mm-hmm. And I think, and I'm still kind of shocked at the sanctuary city policies, because the concrete effect of the sanctuary cities, besides requiring a lot more resources to deport people, because you can't just go into a jail and say when they're about to be released from the jail and have an administrative order that says we can take them into ICE. You have to go before a judge. It's very complicated. But the effect is that these people are then released. They go out and live with a family member or friend. When ICE does raid the house, they take in everybody who's in the country illegally, not just the one person they were after. So all of these cases where they're taking in 5, 6 people in a house, unless it was a safe house or something, those are a direct result of sanctuary city policies.
Charles, these policies are also, we can, the criticism of those policies mainly came from the right. But also, there's other policies that this administration, the Biden administration, carried out that are also mystifying from a left-wing point of view.
Go ahead.
Well, for example, the full-throated support for Gaza, for the Israelis' war in Gaza. They knew that they had a party that really didn't like it. And they knew that the young voters in particular were likely to just sit on their hands. They weren't going to vote for Trump because Trump's on the same side on this issue, but they were going to just not show up to vote. And that's what happened to Kamala, right? They knew this, or they had to know it. And there's ways to support Israel, but sort of more reservedly, not as I'm a Zionist, Team Zion, kill as many Palestinians as possible. Awesome. But that was the message of Joe Biden. They never tempered his message. And Kamala Harris couldn't run away from it. Again, it's mystifying. I admit when I don't know things, and I do not know at all the things that you're mentioning. The thing that I just brought up, I have no idea what the fuck they were thinking.
Well, I'm thinking behind closed doors, but we look at the full-throated support of Ukraine, which you could make a case for at the time, especially. But, the fact that the Biden family made tens of millions of dollars off of Ukraine, and then all of a sudden, the crisis pops up and they're like 1,000% behind a Ukrainian regime, which you could make, and I think rightfully so, say that, especially as time progressed, this isn't a democracy. Zelensky hasn't been up for re-election. There has been no parliamentary elections. People who oppose Zelensky have been thrown in jail. And in addition, did Russia, I'm not trying to make excuses for Russia, but did Russia have some point in saying that, with Ukraine saying we're going to join NATO, it wasn't as clear cut. You could have had a more nuanced approach to this. This was a full-throated support. Now, when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to the border, is there some economic benefit for somebody to support those policies? I don't know. We may not. We may never know.
China is raises similar issues because it completely. I mean, I think a lot of the Republican, the surge in middle and working class people to the Republicans is related to the deindustrialization of America, and the Democrats
Oh, absolutely.
wholeheartedly behind that. But I guess I would just say that with respect to Ukraine first, the Democrats have remained I would say that the policy, the animation of the American policy is less pro-Ukraine and more anti-Russia. And it's the idea is to stop the expansion of a hostile state in Russia, which is the same as the basic anti-communist policy toward the Soviet Union. That's the reason we let people in from Cuba for many years. Anybody who escaped a communist country could come in. They had a special exemption. On Israel, they tried to jump the canyon halfway. They did a lot of stopping of shipments to Israel. And then they finally let some of the things through, but not everything, and so forth.
They made nobody happy.
Made nobody happy. And the same was true in Ukraine. They had a legitimate concern, I believe, that striking deep into Russia, giving Ukraine weapons and permission to strike deep into Russia could escalate the war in a big way. But they just slow walked everything. And of course it was Obama who allowed the fall of Crimea, and it was Obama who allowed the invasion of Georgia, the state of Georgia, the country of Georgia.
Crimea was going to be in Obama's defense. Crimea would have been. I mean, of course, it was very poorly timed for him because he was looking at the end of his presidency and he was hoping to get a few more things done. But I mean, I think Obama he was in a tough spot because the people of Crimea, they're ethnically Russian. They wanted to be in Russia.
Oh yeah.
So what are you going to do? Go to war to save people who don't want to be saved? I mean, that doesn't.
We've done it before, Ted.
True.
You were reminding me, apropos of nothing, of the late great George Wendt, who we should remember. And I saw George. Did you go to when you were living here in Chicago, Scott? Did you go to Second City much?
Sure, of course.
George Wendt and Tim Kazurinsky were stars in my early years in Chicago at Second City. And I got to know Tim a little bit. I never knew George, but they did a press conference in which Brezhnev and Deng Xiaoping did a joint press conference, and it was brilliant as a improvisational comedy. because they had a moderator and they had two translators, who could translate from fake Chinese or fake Russian. And so there were 5 people who could give a punchline to any question from the audience. The audience asked the questions. And the question, which is what Ted reminded me of, was a question to Brezhnev. George went, will the Soviet Union go to war with China? And I can still remember George Wendt's response. I told this to Tim Kazurinsky several years ago. I said, George looked at you and said, the trouble with going to war with China is that 2 hours later you won't go to war again. It's just such a brilliant answer. The problem in China now, I don't think anybody's seen Chairman Xi for 11 days, maybe 12 days.
Is that true?
That's correct.
Oh, wow.
His father's grave.
Where are the Bidens?
His father's grave. Yeah.
Well,
his father's grave has been renamed.
11 days ain't nothing. 4 years.
Wait, his father's grave has been what? Wait, let's finish this.
Renamed, I think, or an honorific to the Chairman Xi's father has been renamed. There's a real power struggle going on in China right now. And one of the things that's pretty clear is that Xi has lost control of the military, that the military seems to be run by a very senior official who is not under Xi's direct control. A lot of this has big implications for America.
That's huge. That's huge.
Their economy is melting down because it's an export-dependent economy, and there's only one great international market, that's us. And when you cut our market off, they can only do 2 things. One is to try to transship things through Vietnam or some other thing and label made in Vietnam on it. And we're going to try to cut that off. We can't cut it all off, but we'll do a lot to cut it off. And we can threaten Vietnam or, Thailand or whoever it's going through. And the other thing is they can try to send it to Europe, the other big market. But Europe has already said we're not going to tolerate it. So I think the 2 big international issues that loom are Iran and China. So we don't have time to talk about that now, but
and that's what I was about to say.
Yeah, but I think that Donald Trump has some real hard international issues that are likely to hit him. So we talked about what could affect the midterm, a big war that the U.S. is involved in, and a recession. Those are the big risks for the Republicans, in my opinion.
Charles, thanks for having us. The pride of Marks, Mississippi. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We're going to have you on again real soon because, and then we're all going to war with China apparently. So Scott,
Ted, it's always lovely to see you. Scott, it's lovely to see you. And I will remind you that my favorite T-shirt that I ever saw in Alabama said, Alabama, literacy is overrated.
Was literacy spelled correctly? Because that would have been
You win, my friend.
Here, just one last thought. If we're looking for an answer.
Well, I mean,
I voted for Stassen.
6 times.
All right.
Bye, guys.
See you soon.
Bye. Thanks again, Charles.
All right,
man.
Thanks, everyone.
That was fun. He's great. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's good. So, all right. As usual, we now come to the song and dance part of the show. Bye, everyone. I turn it over to Scott.
Well, I don't know what to sing now. It's just like, good morning, good morning. That's my grandson is here, and that's what he's singing now. So, although his version is more good morning, good morning, good morning, which is charming too.